calling me.
Sorry, I didn't mean to start. I just want to say hi.
No, you're great. Hi.
It's nice to put a face with the voice.
Yeah, I wish I could be there in person. If it weren't for going over the pass right now, I would have.
Oh, I get it. I get it. All right.
I remember when we used to have to cancel meetings with people who had to come over the past. And now we can just do this. Look how accessible we are.
Seems like it's been a while since I was here. January is really scary.
It apparently is different grants.
I was going to commit to the
Two grants.
planning commission meeting on Thursday, but somebody told me I couldn't.
2303, 2303.
So I think I have an excused absence for Thursday. Okay.
Oh, I see.
We could have you stand in the doorway.
Yeah.
So you just compost.
I hope this is recycling.
Oh, I see. Same grant number, just.
Oh, I'll go to the planning commission meeting. I know somebody. Don't have to go to the planning commission meeting. All right.
Really close enough that 5:15. They start whenever the phone starts, so that's the only reason I hold you off. We'll wait for the CTV then. No, he said that I just John told me that you start when the phone starts, so that's why if you sorry. My phone says 6.
6 o'clock.
It is 6 now. Okay, I agree. I will bring this meeting to order then. This is the Lynchburg City Council study session.
Lift your mic up a little bit.
Bringing the meeting to order. This is the Ellensburg City Council meeting of Monday, February 6th. This is a study session and we have a historic preservation presentation from Michelle Thompson, who is with us through electrons. Do you want to introduce this topic or?
We'll ask Jamie Ailing, our Community Development Director, to introduce her.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of council, Jamie Ailing with Community Development. And what we do have on topic for you tonight for the study session is a historic preservation presentation. We are, as you know, a certified local government. And so as part of that, there are some responsibilities when it comes to preserving history and historic buildings in our districts. And so we thought better to have present to us than the person that knows this inside and out, and that's Michelle Thompson with the Department of Historic Preservation. She gratefully, willingly offered to provide this information to the council. She's also going to be providing similar training to our Landmarks and Design Commission as well later in this month. So I know the invitation was extended to those members to attend tonight, but they are also going to be benefiting from getting this as well. So I guess without too much further ado, I'll just turn this over to Michelle Thompson and let her give the presentation, and then we'll have a little bit of time at the end for any questions as it might relate specifically to Ellensburg.
Thank you.
Good. All right. Good deal. I'm going to share my screen. Let me do that now, actually. I'm going to show from beginning, and I need to be able to share my screen. Somebody, I'm a panelist, but can somebody give me control over to be able to share the screen?
We're working on it.
Okay, thank you. I should have caught that earlier.
You should
And
be
if
able to now.
Okay. Here we go. All right. All right, can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, so let me just make this big again here. All right, hi everybody. My name is Michelle Thompson, and thank you for the nice introduction. I am the Certified Local Government, aka the CLG coordinator for the state of Washington, and I do work for the Department of Archaeology and Historic Preservation. So I had spoken recently with Stacy, and I'm going to do some training with your Landmarks Commission, which I'm really thrilled to do soon. And then Stacy had just asked me if I could check in with you all a little bit and kind of go over the program and give you just some kind of one-on-one information about how it works. It's always good to have a refresher or an introduction if you haven't had one before. And then you can ask me questions when the whole thing is done. I tried to make it fairly short. I don't want to overwhelm you with too much information. You don't need to know the program inside and out, just kind of the basics. Kind of why the program exists, what the benefits are, that kind of stuff. So, and then again, you can ask me any questions that you possibly have at the end, and I will have my contact information. So if you think of a question later on and you want to get in touch with me, then you can ask me that question later too. So, and there's no stupid questions. I know everybody always says that. There really there are no stupid questions. I understand that preservation is not something that, the average person knows inside and out. So this is kind of my life and my job to know all this material. So, and I will say that I'm an Olympian. Like I said, I would be there if I could, but I think Ellensburg is a really beautiful town. And my dad's family has been in Yakima for over 100 years. So I have pretty deep ties to that part of the state. All right. So what the heck is a CLG, a certified local government, right? A lot of times people, I wish that CLGs were called something different, because it's certified local government. It doesn't really make a lot of sense. It doesn't tell you in the title what that means. So a certified local government, it simply means that you have a historic preservation commission in Ellensburg that is certified by the National Park Service. So that was a voluntary thing that Ellensburg did. Lots of cities have historic preservation commissions and they're not a CLG. And then Ellensburg, like I said, they had to apply to become a CLG at one point. So there are about 60 of them at this point in the state of Washington. So a fair amount. And so to become a CLG, Ellensburg had to do some basic things. And kind of at the crux of that was that they needed to create a historic preservation commission, your Landmarks Commission, and then they needed to pass a local ordinance. And so there are benefits of becoming a CLG. Like I said, not every community is a CLG. There are lots of preservation commissions out there that aren't. CLGs are kind of like having a historic preservation commission in a box. Everything is there for you. Any kind of opportunities you need for help, you have direct contact with me, with my office of the Department of Archaeology and Historic Preservation. So it's kind of like, instead of kind of trying to invent your own preservation program and put all that stuff together, you kind of have that already ready to go with the CLG program. The big benefits, like I said, there are three main: technical preservation assistance from my department. That mostly means me, but sometimes, like recently, I was just down in Cowlitz County with our state architectural historian, and we did a presentation together on the different styles of buildings they have in that area. And I'm also a qualified architectural historian, so I can talk to you about kind of anything you need to know about your buildings, about treatment for buildings, the way the CLG program works, any kind of training that your preservation commission needs, or just like we're doing right now. We're doing this right now because Ellensburg is a certified local government. Another major benefit to the CLG program is that every year there is a competitive annual grant, and those are open only to CLGs. And so in Washington State, we had this coming year, we're going to have about $125,000 that will go to CLG programs. And we give that money out in order for the CLGs to run their programs. We didn't even give away all the money last year. So if you are applied for one, it's really likely that you are going to get it. I'll talk a little bit more about the CLG grants in a moment, but you have gone after them in the past. You just updated your First Railroad Edition National Register District with a CLG grant. And then kind of the main benefit of being a CLG is that you help keep Ellensburg. Nobody thinks that you should move into the future and that you can't have new build and housing and all of that kind of stuff. But, you know, being part of the certified local government program, being part of preservation just means holding on to some of that stuff for the future, some of the stuff that makes Ellensburg, so it's recognizable into the future. Okay, so the responsibilities of your commission, and these are just kind of the general things. They promote preservation, educate the public. They review nominations to the local Ellensburg Register. They keep a local Ellensburg Register. You have a list of things that are actually on your local register in Ellensburg. They review changes to buildings on the Ellensburg Register. That's called a design review, right? You do design review in order to seek a certificate of appropriateness. They review something called special tax valuation applications. I'll talk about all this stuff a little bit later too. They review nominations to the National Register of Historic Places. And they apply for grants and they ask for help. They ask my agency for help. So those are kind of the major responsibilities of the commission. And I'll also send you this PowerPoint too, so you don't have to remember all of this. Okay, so a couple of things that I want you to know about preservation and kind of how registers work. There are three possible registers that a historic building might be on. So you've got the National Register of Historic Places. We have the State Register, which is through my office. The National Register is obviously it's a federal program. It's run by the National Park Service. The State Register is my office as staff, and then again you've got that local Ellensburg Register, and that's through your ordinance. So some kind of primary things that I would want you and anybody to know about these registers. They're completely separate programs. They have different criteria for getting on each, but they are completely separate programs. National, State, and Ellensburg registers are all voluntary. So somebody has to sign up to be on, has to actually want to be on one of these registers. The only time that would be any different is if you had a registered district. And you know, in Ellensburg, you've got a couple. You've got the First Railroad, you've got your downtown register district. So that's their national register district. So you're never going to have 100% of people agree to a register district. So there has to be some kind of way of determining. And I'm not sure how your ordinance is stated, but it probably says something like, you know, the simple majority, 50% plus one of the building owners have to agree to being on the register. To be on any of the registers, a building needs to be 50 years old. It does not need to be fancy. It does not need to be the best building that was ever built in Ellensburg. You know, a lot of just kind of working class buildings, really kind of plain commercial buildings. If they're important to you, they can be eligible for the Ellensburg Register. A building can be on one of the registers or it can be on all three. The Ellensburg Register is the only register that automatically protects buildings, and that's through design review. And again, I'll talk about that a little bit more in just a second. But there's no review of changes to buildings on the National or the State Register unless those buildings are receiving funding for historic preservation. So a really common misconception about preservation is that if you get on the National Register, on the State Register, especially the National Register, that, you know, anytime you paint your house or you change out a door or window, that the government comes in and tells you that you can't do that. As far as the National and State Register is concerned, that is just not true. You can basically do whatever you want to. You can demolish a building on the National Register unless somebody's receiving preservation funds to do preservation work on a building that's listed on the National or the State Register. The federal government can't tell anybody what to do with their buildings. The only time the comment can be made on changes to a building is stuff that's listed on the Ellensburg Register. And there are different funding opportunities for each of these registers. So that's kind of why you get on a register. You get on a register partially because it's like, you're on a register and you kind of have the clout, I'm on the national register, you put a little plaque on your building or whatever, but it can also open people up to different financial incentives. So why do we need CLGs? Why do we need the local register? I just kind of pointed to this a little bit, but I said that there's the national register and the state register are honorary only. Again, even when you get on one of those registers, you get a little thing in the mail that says it's honorary only. Again, the government doesn't swoop in and tell you what you can and can't do with your building. There may be funding available. If you get funding, then there will be, then we will have a say about what you do to your building. So again, the Ellensburg Register is the only register with the power to protect a building that's not receiving preservation money. And the reason for that is because Washington is a home rule state, right? So the federal government does not have the ability to tell people what they can and can't do with their private property, with their buildings. The state government doesn't have the ability to do that. And Washington, as a home rule state, there's an ability for local communities to create an ordinance that does give a little bit of protection. So your ordinance does allow for a design review of buildings that are listed on the Ellensburg Register. So if you really are trying to protect a building and have somebody have eyes on what's happening, the changes to a historic building, the best bet for that is actually being on the Ellensburg Register. Okay, and then so this is for the Ellensburg Register, for the local register, and all of this stuff is in Ellensburg's ordinance too. When somebody applies for a permit to make changes that are outside of like ordinary maintenance on a building that they have voluntarily listed on the Ellensburg Register or is in a local district, a local historic district, then it goes through the process of design review, and that's the thing that the Landmarks Commission does. But they also, the commission follows a set of 10 guidelines, and those are called the Secretary of the Interior Standards. These are something put out by the National Park Service. These are kind of like the golden rule for historic preservation. These are meant to be used from like the White House to like a shack in Mississippi, that's historic. They're kind of meant to apply to all situations. They're very kind of loose intentionally, but that keeps the decisions about the changes to a building from being arbitrary, because we all know how in small towns or bigger towns, that local infighting with, among commissions, and so and so said I could do this to my building, but then, or I couldn't do this to my building, but they told, so and so down the road that they could, that following the Secretary of the Interior standards just ensures that it's not just the opinion of the people that are on the Conservation Landmarks Commission. Okay, so again, since you're a CLG, you get those CLG grants every year. You can apply for those. So every year, my department gets money from the federal government for the entire state for their federal or for our historic preservation program. By federal law, we have to put 10% of what we get towards the certified local governments. And again, that's how they're able to apply for those grants. So they apply to my office, they turn in the applications to me. The applications are actually open right now, and Stacy's aware that they're open. There's usually about 3 months to fill them out. And like I said earlier, right now they think there's about $125,000 roughly for this coming year. And so the grant money is used to carry out your responsibilities as a CLG. So you survey one of the big things you do, just like you just did with that, with the railroad, the first railroad edition, you survey your historic neighborhoods, historic buildings, your downtowns, this, all of this stuff was done when you got your National Register district, the first railroad district. Somebody came in and surveyed. There was money to hire a consultant, a professional consultant, to come in and survey and make recommendations about, what buildings were eligible for the national, state, or local register. And so that, or if there was potentially a local historic district there, in their opinion, or if there was a National Register historic district there. So again, you do that so that you can open up those buildings to the different funding types. CLG grant money can be used for educational materials, walking tours. A lot of the certified local governments are now starting to work with the Main Street program, and also Ellensburg is Main Street. So when I do Main Street design work too, so I'm kind of trying to work, or I am trying to work really intentionally with the certified local governments and the Main Street program. So you can kind of do some revitalization work with your downtown, or things like, like I said, walking tours or getting things listed in your downtown. Well, I guess you already do. You have a National Register district on the National Register, but to be able to open those things up to funding. So those two programs can work together. Trainings, like I said, I mean, if you want to do a training for building owners of historic buildings on masonry repair, wood window repair, trainings for your commission, again, just like we're doing, tonight, I can come to you in person, we can do Zoom, whatever. I'm trained in materials preservation, all kinds of stuff, kind of you name it. And if I can't do it, I'll find somebody who will. And then national and local register nominations. I kind of mentioned that a moment ago. And then the districts, hiring those consultants to see what buildings are eligible for those registers, or what potential districts you might have. And again, so that opens up money for individual buildings, depending on what register they might be eligible for. Or if you get a district, it can open up preservation funding to a bunch of buildings at once, just like your downtown National Register district. And I'll talk about in a minute the different funding sources and kind of how that works. Okay, well, I guess I'm there. So one of the big ones is something called special tax valuation. And this is written into your ordinance. When Ellensburg became a certified local government, my department gave you all a template for your ordinance. So you kind of made sure that you had everything that you needed in there to kind of follow state laws and federal laws for preservation. And one of the things that was required when you adopted your ordinance is that you adopted the ability to give special tax valuation to buildings that are on the Ellensburg Register of Historic Places, or buildings that are in an Ellensburg, a local Ellensburg district. And so basically what this is, I'm not going to bore you with exactly how this works, and you can ask me questions if you want to, and I will break it down for you, but it's an adjustment to lower property taxes for 10 years following preservation work. So as I said, the building needs to be listed on the Ellensburg Register or contributing to a local Ellensburg district. It needs to be income producing or residential. So it can basically be any building. And it must be substantial. So there's qualified expenditures. That's usually kind of anything that's not nailed down as kind of rule, or anything that is nailed down as kind of rule of thumb is eligible. So things like, bathtubs and appliances and that kind of stuff that you could pick up and move are not eligible, but it doesn't need to be the historic part of the building. It can be HVAC, it can be rewiring, it can be roof, foundation. But the formula for this is the work must be at least 25%, that the owner must put at least 25% of the cost or the value of the building minus the cost of the land into the building. And then that amount is calculated by your county assessor and then subtracted from the property taxes for 10 years. So this was passed in 1986, I think, in Washington State. So this is particular to Washington State. And the purpose of it was to prevent people that were sitting on historic buildings, owners of historic buildings, that didn't want to make improvements to them, because with improvements to a building, the building is valued higher, and then you have a higher tax rate. So your taxes will still go up on a building, but not as much as they would have had you not had that special tax valuation, and that gets flagged by the assessor's office. So it's 10 years. And it doesn't prevent, again, as building prices or housing prices grow in Ellensburg for other reasons, it doesn't prevent that from happening, but it does take that initial chunk of money that the owner put into the building off of the price of the tax that they would pay for a decade. National Register, federal historic tax credits. So this is a 20% federal income tax credit. And this is for buildings only listed in the National Register or contributing to a National Register district. So any of those buildings in your downtown, those commercial buildings, income producing buildings in your downtown, anything that's income producing like a rental, unit in the First Railroad edition, or you've got a lot of individually listed buildings in the National Register too, in Ellensburg. If any of them are income producing, they can qualify for this federal historic tax credit. And again, it must be a substantial, so this isn't, just a little bit of work on the building, it's a substantial amount. And there's a formula for this, and I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty of that right now, but these are used a lot with commercial projects for like a historic reuse. Like maybe you have an old factory downtown and somebody wants to buy it and turn it into, a restaurant on the bottom floor and some shops, and you've got some housing upstairs, that kind of thing. So anything that's income producing, but it's going to be like a big ticket cost. And again, it's the qualified expenditures are the same as the special tax valuation. So anything that you can't pick up and move is eligible for federal historic tax credits. On one of the things I keep using this word contributing. So contributing to a National Register district or contributing to a local district, that just means that it needs to be a building that's actually historic in that district. So it needs to be at least 50 years old. There's some criteria for it. And so it just gets run by my office to affirm for the National Register stuff. Yes, this is a contributing building to the district. So whoops. And then there's lots and lots and lots of grants. They come out all the time. There are state grants through my office, and there are grants through the National Register. A lot of them say, a lot of the grants that we give out at DAP through the state will say that a building either needs to be listed in the National Register or in the state register. So great, whichever one. And every year we do historic theater grants, historic courthouse grants. I'm not sure how old your courthouse is, but it's looking like it might be nearing about the 50-year age mark. So remember, 1973 is considered historic now. Historic cemetery grants. Thorpe Mill just got something called a Third Places grant, and they replaced part of their roof. That's because they were on the National Register. Heritage barn grants. You've got at least one barn in Ellensburg that's on our Heritage Barn Registry. It's just basically a state register, but those can be eligible for all kinds of rehabilitation too. So again, just kind of remember, it's the different registers. You need to be in a register to qualify for preservation grants. But once you get on a register, there's a lot of different grants that you could get, or those federal historic tax credits, or the special tax valuation. Just kind of depends on what register you're on. So I told you I'd make it short and sweet and just kind of give you an overview. So that's all I have for you right now. And then I just want to allow enough time for everybody to go ahead and ask questions. So thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. That was helpful.
Good, thank you.
We do have to make decisions about these things, so it's
Mhm.
nice to have the background. Are there questions? From the council? That's easy then. You
That's actually a
you
good
covered it well.
Are you sure you're not just totally overwhelmed?
I did have since we want to make this
Sure.
work, Michelle, I guess. I did have a question on your CLG grant slide.
Yeah.
Down to the bottom. This goes to the National Register nominations.
Yeah.
So it says to open property owners, so it's a preservation tax incentive. I guess my question is, are those types of applications required to be coordinated through the CLG, or are private property owners able to access these funds on their own?
For the National Register.
The
Yeah.
CLG, the 10% CLG, whatever, the 125,000.
No, it's only for the CLG. Yeah, good question. It's only for the CLG. Yeah, they have to apply for it. Yeah, so not. But the CLG could apply on behalf of a resident in Ellensburg to list a building.
That was going to be my next
Yeah,
question. I was like,
definitely.
what's the path to
Yep.
open the owners. So it is coordinated.
They do the work for them. And so Ellensburg say, you know, you've got a few historic homes that are individually listed on the National Register that are now open to, you know, grants and tax credits and stuff. If you had, say, another historic home that the owner wanted to list on the National Register, all they would have to do is talk to Stacy or talk to the Landmarks Commission and say, hey, I'm interested in listing my building. And then your Landmarks Commission could apply for a grant to hire a consultant to actually write that nomination for them, because there's a nomination for the Park Service. And then it goes through with the help of my office with actually getting listed in the National Register.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, so we don't ask you to do we don't ask the CLG to do anything that we don't give funding for or don't give help with. We want people to be listed on these registers so that they can get these funding sources.
I did think of a question.
Yes.
So it seems like we get wrapped around Department of Interior standards more
Mhm.
than anything else.
Yeah.
And interpretation of whether we're meeting them or not. Is that common? And
Yes.
what is so would that be, if there's a conflicting opinion about those,
Mhm.
should we just consult you? Is that?
Yes, you can. And that's definitely why. So that's definitely why partially why I'm doing a refresher training with you all. And that's exactly why, you know, you've got, if you're thinking, you know, we're not interpreting these the same, you know, is there somebody that, you know, that really understands the stuff that we can talk to? That's when you reach out to me and say, hey, can we get a training on this? And you can ask me, you know, individual questions. I would prefer to not, you know, to kind of stay out of it until, you know, it kind of gets to the point where you're like, we just can't agree, obviously, on something. I won't come in and make a decision for you unless I really have to. But I can very gracefully train your commission to understand the way that the standards work. Because they're meant to be pretty self-explanatory, but they're not always fully intuitive. And there's some other materials that I have for you that I think will be helpful when we do some training on the design review.
So will that be covered for the landmarks?
That's the main thing I'm going to talk about. What I'm going to do a training with. Yep. Yeah. So that's always, there's support for everything. You know, you want to get something listed, there's money for that. You want to, you know, your commission struggling with, you know, how to get something, you know, listed on the local register, how to do a design review, how to apply the special tax valuation. That's when you reach out to me, because as a CLG that you have that right. You know, that's part of the benefit of being a CLG. You know, you do this work, and then I meet my end of the bargain by being your kind of, you know, professional preservation person that you can rely on, even though I know that you do have a professional, you know, staff of preservation, and she's wonderful, but I'm also a resource for that.
Thank you.
I would just add, along the same lines, what Michelle's describing, staff, our own internal staff, Jamie, Stacy in particular, reached out to Michelle, and we were talking about our streetery conversation, and then I also followed up with Michelle, and I think just to really get a good hold on the applicability of the whole historic preservation process with this specific application. I think it's complicated, but I think she provided very clear guidance to us on what really does qualify and where it's appropriate and where it's not. So that was just a good example. I wasn't going to let you get away with that, at least weighing in on streeteries a little bit. So
I knew it would come up, you know, and sometimes there's not a perfect answer, you know, that's in your ordinance. You know, I mean, we discussed that a little bit, and it seemed, you know, to be a matter of, you know, defining what a streetery is. You know, there's always some, you know, things that could be done at the local level. But, you know, when you're having most times when there's, you know, contention about something with the commission, consulting the ordinance, consulting the standards, you know, they're there for a reason. And but not always. I mean, sometimes, you know, every day I get a call from somebody where it's like something wasn't in the ordinance. You know, it's it's a kind of wild card situation. It's a one-off that's unique, you know, to your community, or probably not totally unique to your community, but, and you're not alone with having people kind of not understand or not, take in the Secretary of the Interior standards in quite the same way. I mean, you're not alone in that. Every commission has those issues, but that is the reason why we try to follow that set of standards. I mean, there are commissions that will do things like, say like, oh yeah, that's fine, I like that, or I don't like that, or that color is good, and it's like, no, like it's not an opinion, right? Just like, you all, the city council, you follow, rules and guidelines. It's the same thing with preservation commissions. And really at the end of the day, I will be honest that preservation commissions, local preservation commissions, can kind of get a bit of a bad rap. But really what they're meant to do is to be just like what you do with city council. It's neighbors helping neighbors, and at another time, somebody whose building is up for design review, or they want to put their building on the register, they may be sitting on the landmarks commission at one point. It's a group of people who care about Ellensburg retaining its character, and it's supposed to be people helping neighbors, right? The commission gets training on preservation and how to understand and interpret all of this stuff, and then they pass that down to or pass that on to other people in the community. It doesn't always work like that, as we know, but that's what I'm here for, to help.
Thank you.
One is the Landmarks and Design Commission recently issued a COA for demolition of building, and not having read everything, I'm wondering, is that in the purview of what it means to steward a CLG?
Yes, unfortunately, there's no protection when it comes down to it. At the end of the day, to fully prevent a demolition, the CLG is able to issue a waiver to the COA in order to allow a demolition. I'm not sure exactly what your local ordinance says without looking at it specifically, but you may have something. A lot of people have added something to their ordinance where, and it's something you might, I mean, if you're concerned about demolition, it's something that we can talk about. You might add something to your ordinance like, once all alternatives have been discussed, or to try to do the best you can to prevent the person from wanting to demolish the building. But at the end of the day, it's really difficult to fully prevent that from happening just because of property rights, even with a local ordinance.
So there is a demolition ordinance being drafted that we will be reviewing in March.
That is correct. So staff have been working on a demolition ordinance to
Great.
address just that. And so that actually is coming before Landmarks and Design. I think it's this month, and it should be to council next month.
The fact you have Stacy there too does not surprise me that you've got a demolition ordinance that you're working on. I think that's wonderful. Yeah.
Thank you. My second question was, what strategies have you seen in communities like ours that are successful in terms of educating the greater community, and also building owners and residents in these CLGs?
I think the biggest thing is kind of the thing that I've been alluding to several times, is that idea that it isn't the preservation police. That it really is the point of the CLG, really at the heart of the CLG, is that, if you're invested in Ellensburg, and you're invested in Ellensburg, growing into the future, but also maintaining part of what makes Ellensburg for the future. You can't bring everybody on board with that. You're not going to bring everybody on board with that. It's amazing to me, and probably to all of you, but, clearly there are people that just kind of don't care about that. It's not any kind of a priority for them. I think explaining to people and calming fears about what it means to be on a register is the big thing, and that's a major thing with preservation in general. Preservation has, and rightfully so, it's earned a rep in the United States as being something that's punitive, and we were talking about, that it's your neighbor telling you that, they don't like the fence that you put up, or the color that you've painted your house, or that kind of stuff, and who wants to who wants to do that. I wouldn't want to put my house on a register if that was going to be the case. But, you know, understanding that there are things like the standards that the commission should be following. And so part of that, you know, if you feel like the commission isn't fully up to speed or maybe fully following the standards or the guidelines, you know, that's why it is good to bring me in and we can talk about training for how to do design reviews, just to kind of calm the fears of people listing their buildings and also using those incentives. You know, the reason that those incentives exist is because really at the end of the day, we cannot fully prevent a building from being demolished or being changed. You know, and that's why those incentives exist. So using that kind of neighborly approach with people. And again, you know, one of the things that a lot of communities have been doing that are a CLG and a Main Street is working with, you know, the CLG will work with the Main Street program, and the Main Street staff or the Main Street people help bring that information, especially kind of to your downtown. Again, you know, you already have a National Register district downtown. You know, any of those buildings that are within that district that are actually, like I talked about, contributing, right? They kind of meet certain standards, which is probably the majority, or would be the majority of them. Those are already open to federal historic tax credits if somebody wanted to do work on it. You know, so if you've had say like a building owner downtown of a commercial property that has successfully completed work using those federal historic tax credits or gotten a grant, you know, they can kind of be ambassadors for other people in the community. You know, look, I put my building on the register, I put it on the local register, and it's not scary.
And I would just add that we are actually working closer with the our Main Street program, so the Downtown Association, about making sure that business owners know about the historic preservation grants that we provide every year. And so we're starting to do more kind of interactive education with them as well. And I think I heard a few things here today too that I think we can do some additional education and outreach with the Downtown Association to make sure that the information gets in people's hands that can actually use it.
Yes, which is exactly what we want. So when I started this position about 2 years ago, they kind of created a position for me for where I was working with the certified local governments and the Main Streets, because it's all local preservation, right? It's kind of, you know, working with these people together, and how do these programs overlap, and how can they kind of champion each other, and how can they work together? And I met your new executive director for the Downtown Association and Gig Harbor at the Main Street retreat just a week or two ago. And she's wonderful and very excited about working with Stacy and working with the Landmarks Preservation Commission and what we can do together. So I'm excited about the potential for this. It's, you know, it's honestly not something that my agency has attempted before, to kind of bring these in a more codified way like this, to bring these two organizations together. So I'm excited about where that could go. And Ellensburg is a great example of that.
So I have a question for you. So
Yeah.
as a small business owner downtown in the historic area,
Yeah.
are these grants available just to the property owner, or can a business like do tenant improvement with the owner's permission kind of?
They're just for the property owner. It has to actually be a property owner. One of the things you might consider at some point, some communities have done this and it's funded differently, like a lot of times like the B&O tax or whatever. And this is one of the things Main Streets have done in the past for their downtown is facade improvement grants. I don't know if Ellensburg's ever attempted that, but, you know, coming up with a metric for, you know, who you're going to give the grants to. But, you know, if you've got, you know, a couple buildings that, you know, could use a little bit of help with just kind of, you know, sprucing up their facades, and maybe you wanted to make sure that, you know, since you're in a National Register district and it's your downtown, that the work that, you know, if they were going to do anything to their facade, that it was, you know, within preservation standards, you know, that they were kind of following those kind of best practices, that kind of thing. I can work with you with that too, because I do preservation sensitive design for Main Street buildings. So it's just another potential, but that could potentially be for, you know, business owner, but a business owner, not necessarily the building owner, but they'd probably have to work in tandem, but that would be a local decision.
Anyone else? If you're not having any questions, we came up with a few.
Thank you. That's always how it goes.
I'll just say that from a staff perspective, it's very helpful to have Michelle at our fingertips, be able to call. Things have gotten more popular as we do them. So when I first got here, we had done one special valuation. And then last year alone, we did 3 special valuations. So the information's getting out there and there's more
It
people
is.
taking advantage of the programs. We utilize her resources more and more. So
I was just crunching the numbers on special tax valuation too, because I have to present to my boss on the numbers for special tax valuation. I was very proud of Ellensburg with those 3. That's great. But you know, like we talked about, you know, maybe the people that have gotten special tax valuation, you know, I don't know if you could ever, you know, even get them to kind of be champions in the community, or, you know, tell your neighbors, you know, or is somebody willing to say, hey, I did this, and, you know, it's fine, and it's actually beneficial. Because we want to see it go to as many people as possible, you know, and like I said, it doesn't need to be the fanciest, best building that was ever built in Ellensburg in order to be eligible for special tax valuation.
So, and I would just add, I always think about how do we pay for these things? And just as a reminder, typically in our community development department, our permit processing fees support the work of our staff. And with our certified local government credential, essentially, we actually provide the process really to move through a certificate of appropriateness at no charge to the applicant. And so
Great.
so our general fund dollars are actually supporting essentially a full-time staff person to help shepherd this process and to help preserve our downtown. So it's an investment that we as a city are making in the community too.
I love that.
I have one quick last question. Michelle, on the once a community has been CLG certified,
Mhm.
Ellensburg, is there any ongoing work required to maintain the certification and or cost?
No cost. I mean, you just ongoing, you need to hold, I think it's a minimum of 4 meetings a year. You need to, and it's usually once a month. I mean, you will do way more than that. You need to follow the Open Public Meetings Act, you know, there's just, you know, basic things like that. Nothing that's, you don't need to do a recertification or, you know, anything like that. I kind of keep my eyes peeled on the different CLGs to make sure everybody's kind of functioning and healthy, and if they need help. But you know, you need to continue to meet, add stuff to the register. I mean, you're not going to get taken off this, you're not going to not become a CLG or anything. You know, you don't need to do any, you don't really need to do anything other than just continue your work.
It's good. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for being with us.
Sure.
And we will break until 7 p.m.
Thank you so much. And please get in touch, and don't hesitate to get in touch with me personally too. Any questions you have, I'm always happy to talk to you until you don't want to hear me talk anymore about preservation. So that's what I'm here for. So take advantage of it, please.
We appreciate that.
Thank you. Good night.
I guess it means we shouldn't do this.